Hey guys, how's it going? This is the part 2, the final part to my Nüwa painting. This is where I actually paint her, and I also update the base a little bit. As you can see from the small little part right here, I have finished it, but you'll wait to the end of the video to watch that, of course, because no cheating. Anyway guys, I had a blast painting her. She was fantastic. Diemension Games did a fantastic job on this miniature line, and I can't say how much I enjoyed this, because I really did. It's so much different than painting a board game piece that it was well worth the time investment. Guys, I hope you enjoy watching this kind of creative process for me. As always, leave me your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought about this series and whether or not you'd like to see me paint perhaps another miniature line from this, or perhaps from Limbo miniatures, or something along those lines of these kind of nice fancy miniatures. Anyway guys, thanks so much. Let's get right to it. Alright, starting things out, I'm using Elfic Flesh. I've only used this once before, but I really like it because it's still very skin-like in that it's still a tan, but it is much whiter, much lighter skinned than even the basic skin tone. If you have Citadel, it's not as white as Pallid Flesh tone, or whatever it is. I don't know. I've never had any luck with anything close to white from Citadel. But anyway, this is a Vallejo paint, and I really like it as a base color. It can still whiten up to the point where it almost looks white, and I'm actually going for that. I want her to be kind of radiant, in the sense that I'm actually going to end up darkening the base a little bit. You'll see that towards the end of the video. But in this one, I just wanted her to feel like she's out of place. I want her to work in the base. I want her to seem like it's natural and it's not just pegged on per se, like they exist in the same world, but it's more like there are two different parts of the world, or two different sides of the same coin kind of thing. So she's supposed to be in this dark, kind of gloomy, magical forest, but she is bright and radiant. So I'm going to be brightening her up a little bit here and shading her with some blues that get really exciting here. There's a lot of parts like this because of her hair. It's like half of the mini hair. I mean, she has some really long hair, and so she has like skin on the sides, and then obviously her arms and her hands. The concept art of this fantastic art style, by the way, I don't know who does it, but they did a really good job with it. However, you don't really get a whole picture of her in like perfect lighting. It's very moody, and so that leaves a lot to kind of your artistic freedom, I guess. And so for me, I'm doing a lot of blues and greens. So here I have Drakenhof Nightshade, and I'm actually putting this straight out of the pot onto her, although fairly lightly, as you can see me even dabbing it a little bit. I'm going to be blending this back in, and eventually what I do, and I'll get to that, and I'll show you when I do that, but I'm going to mix the Elfic Flesh paint, instead of with water to thin it down, I'm going to thin it down even more with this shade so that it turns a little blue while also getting thinner. And thinning your paints with a shade is a fantastic way to blend the two, in my opinion. So if you want to darken it up, add some Nuln oil, some Agrek Thirst Shade, something like that if you want to brighten it up. So this right here, you can see it's a little blue tinted here. That's because I actually put the Drakenhof Nightshade in there. So I wanted some parts that are very blue, those parts where the machine is coming out of her, or grafted onto her. I wanted kind of almost a more sickly blue, but I'm still gonna blend it in nicely with this, so it's not gonna be as drastic or anything like that, but it is definitely more blue and ideally a little bit noticeable. But for the most part, I don't want this to be some artistic kind of shadowing where it gets deep blue or anything like that. Instead, I'm just trying to get it to where it meshes with the green and then her hair as well, which is gonna have some blues in it. I don't want to get too ahead of myself there, but I just wanted to kind of, again, be a cohesive whole, fit into the theme, but to where it helps if you're told that there's blue shading in her skin, as opposed to being like, oh, there's blue shading in her skin, that's the first thing I notice. That's not what I want. Okay, so now I have Elfic Flesh tone out again, severely watered down. This is just the Elfic Flesh tone by its own, just really watered down, so it's very thin. I'm essentially glazing here. Again, just working on blending it. The front of her particularly is almost all skin. There's a lot of skin here, and it's a whole top half. Additionally, because I want her to be vibrant, herself, her being, the human part of her, or whatever. Again, I don't know too much about the lore, but that seemed like a cool idea to me. I wanted that to really pop, so I'm spending a lot of time making this be the focus of the miniature. It's going to be in the center of the base, and ideally this is the focus of your gaze when you look at her as a display piece. You see that pose that she's in with her arms out and her fingers out, the uncertainty on her face, all of that stands out and really is the first thing you grasp. And then you see the rest. You see how she's like, has this tail, but she's in the middle of this muddy wood that seems magical, and she seems like a fish out of water or somebody out of place. So now I've added a little bit of white, so now I'm going to continue to blend, but that was kind of the middle part, and I skipped several coats here. I mean, glazing, it's coat after coat after coat of very, very small changes. It was very thinned paints. And in fact, even this, you're not getting all the coats. I have 5.5 hours of just recorded footage here that I'm, obviously speeding up by skipping parts and showing you key parts here, but there was plenty more, probably double that at least, on just other coats that I didn't bother filming because, you guys don't need to see me apply the same thing 3 times, obviously. So here, again, I'm kind of doing almost as if she's looking at a light here. I actually try to do a little bit of, like, smart lighting here, to where it's kind of like at a 45 towards her. So, like, on her left breast, it's actually, like, shaded or highlighted, I guess I should say, more on that side than in the middle. Same with that arm outstretched there. I wasn't sure if I didn't want to do... I had a thought of, like, almost a searchlight, like the police looking for somebody, right? That kind of thing, but I didn't want to drive that contrast or do anything that out of whack from what I normally do. I've never done anything like that, and I'd be afraid I'd ruin it if nothing else. So this is kind of my attempt at it. I'm just making sure that the lighting seems to be coming from a certain angle, at least in general. Alright, now this is kind of fun. This is Averland Sunset, a fantastic color. I love painting with Averland Sunset. I don't know why, but it's borderline my favorite color. I really like Emerald too, but for some reason I love painting with this color, so it's a really good color. I'm mixing that with some weapon bronze, about a 1-to-1, but really I just eyeballed it. I wasn't concerned about reproducing it or anything like that. I made plenty, and I just wanted it to look kind of spot on here. Adding a metallic into a regular paint makes that, obviously metallic, to the point where they actually sell metallic medium, that you can just metallicize any paint, but I didn't want Averland Sunset. I wanted it to be a little bit darker and more orange here, and I think this really helps with that by adding the weapon bronze in there, which is a fantastic metallic color on its own. I really like Army Painter metallic colors here. Obviously, because I finished with the skin, I'm being very careful here once I get towards the skin. Definitely take your time. You don't want to mess it up. Most people, I imagine, don't finish one thing and go to another. I actually kind of put some thought into why I tend to do that. It's because I like to have these mini accomplishments. You see, I actually use like Trello to plan all of my paints. That's what you see like below in the description. By the way, in the description below, you can see a list of all the paints I did and where I put them. That's on all of my paintings. And it's just the notes I use. But I get to check that box every time I finish one. And that's, like, it keeps me motivated. It really does actually help. So I finished something, and I feel like I'm making progress. What you don't want is it to be like a Rubik's Cube, at least me, like a Rubik's Cube, to where even though you're almost done because you've base coated everything, it looks terrible. It looks like you're way off and you have like a million things to do. Additionally, if you keep all your washing in one step, they can mix. I've had that happen before. I actually kind of just prefer to go from one thing to another and then just kind of be a little bit more careful. Maybe it takes a bit more time. I'm not sure about that. Maybe a bit more active time. Like I said, I'm not waiting for washes to dry as much, but it is what it is. So here what you can see is I got Elfic Flesh again, and again I'm blending a little bit more between that blue and the non-blue. Again, just taking special care. You can see my brush almost looks like it doesn't even have paint on it. It's so little and so thinned. Not only is it super thin, but then I dab it on a napkin so it soaks that up. So there's just barely any here, and I'm kind of bringing it towards where I want it to not be blue, so it kind of blends that way. Again, getting her facial structure in there. There's a little bit heavier blue shading on the other side of her face because, like I said, I kind of wanted the light to be coming from this side that you're seeing the mini now, but a little bit higher. So like always, if you're spending this much time on a miniature, you just hope it ended up good. So hey, if you think this was not a huge waste of my time, go ahead and like the video right now. Just take a real quick moment to press that like button. Let me know that I didn't, just waste 10 hours of my life making this for you. And don't even talk about the editing. But anyway, I do hope you guys enjoyed it. It's definitely something with a lot more oomph than I typically do. This is definitely a miniature meant to be painted as opposed to a board game piece that I happen to paint. So, you know, it's a totally different perspective. It's really fun to paint these, by the way. If you ever get a chance to get some kind of really nice resin pieces that are big, like 75mm, something like that, do yourself a favor and at least buy one that excites you and paint it. See if you like it. It's just for pure hobby, though this can actually be used in the game. I'm not going to get into all that, though. It just was fun to paint. Right now I'm using Reikland Fleshshade, which is kind of like a red-brown. So they have Seraphim Sepia from Citadel. That's like an orange-brown, a very light orange-brown. Reikland Fleshshade is kind of a red-brown. So I really like to use it on oranges because it's not the Crimson Caribou or Caribou Crimson or whatever the red one is. It's just slightly red, but still kind of brown. Great for golds, bronzes, stuff like that. I think it shades it really, really well. And as you can tell, it actually doesn't shift the color too much because it's pretty close to this weapon bronze, which is already kind of a dark orange. And so I think it works pretty well to the point where I go straight to highlighting and I don't do the base color. Kind of saves me step 2, which is, again, kind of nice. Now that's another thing you're going to see here probably fairly shortly. I forget exactly when I do it, but I'm really pushing myself to do some more extreme highlights, some higher contrast. You'll see that especially on the armor and the scales, and then even on the hair somewhat, though I'm going to play around with that quite a bit. It just a personal challenge to myself to really kind of make it pop. Alright, so now I have White Gray. White Gray by Vallejo is fantastic because it's not quite white, but it can pass as white. So rarely you're going to ever have pure white, and typically when you do, it seems to pop far too much, kind of like a pure black. This White Gray is just off enough to where it's really good. In fact, it's typically my go-to. If I'm going to paint something that's the color of white, I actually paint it White Gray. For hair, again, perfect. Nobody has stark white hair. I mean, if they do, it's kind of weird and crazy anyway. And again, certainly not the focus point I want here on the miniature, though the hair is obviously very well sculpted and very nice. So I'm going to spend some time highlighting and shading it and whatnot. For White Gray, I actually do not water it down. If you thin it down, it's too thin. It just does not. You could apply it 10 times and probably still not get good coverage. If you, just shake it up in the bottle, pour it on your wet palette, and then go straight from that brush onto the mini, and actually fairly thick, that's when I get my best results. So, it's funny how when you use different companies and then just different paints within the same company and the same product line, you find out kind of the intricacies of how to use the paint. I think to me, that seems half of painting. Half of my journey painting for the last about year, a little bit more than a year now, I guess, probably approaching a year and a half of painting. And I think I do better now because I understand how the paint works more than anything. To the point where I know my problem paints and my non-problem paints, like White Gray. I love it as a color. I hate it as a paint just because it's a little difficult. Though I suppose I've never loved painting with any white, so maybe I'm just already getting bitter. I'm not sure. Anyway, I got Nuln oil here. This is actually one of 2 washes I'm going to do. This is to get those deep shadows. I'm then going to add a blue to give it a blue hue. If I did just straight blue, it'd look too blue. It'd look kind of silly. I don't want that kind of vibrant blue shine like it's like snowfall white or something like that. This is her hair, and therefore the shadows are actually semi-dark, and it gives a lot of pop. But it's shifted blue. So I'm actually using a wash on top of a wash to shift the first wash. It's kind of interesting. Never done it before. I think it turned out great. As always, the white part of my eyes are ivory. It's not going to pop out as much with her because she's so brightly skinned. That's fine. White, if you do white eyes that are actually white, again, it's so stark. It looks like they're bug eyes all the time. It's like too white. Ivory's a very close white. To the point where you could probably do White Gray, but I don't find the coverage very good. Now, this is interesting. Again, not using pure black. I'm using Black Gray. It's kind of like the black version of the White Gray that I have. Fantastic. One of my favorite colors. Very dark, but still not quite pitch black here. And I'm doing her eyebrows, and I'm also going to do her eyeliner. Fun tip, and again, the difference between this scale of miniature and good quality resin that's well sculpted, that's meant to be painted. All of this is already on the miniature. She actually has molded eyebrows to the point where you can actually do the side part of it, like you would normally highlight things with the side of the brush, and it'll pick up just on the eyebrow and not her forehead. Even her eyelid where the eyeliner is, again, sculpted. In fact, the only freehand I'm doing here is I do that kind of a wing flourish. I don't know what. I don't know what makeup terms are. The little arch on the side past the eyebrow that goes up towards the forehead. Just doing a little bit of that. You know, it's whatever. Alright, so this is Abaddon Black. One of the few times I'm just doing black here. And this is just for the pupil. Again, being very careful. Trying to hold the miniature at about the same angle when I press down. And the key is not to press too hard. If you press too hard, your brush is going to bend and it doesn't make it a perfect circle and typically connects to the eyebrow or something like that. So for that, again, just a very light dab where you're just touching the tip of the brush. Obviously that means it can't start to dry out on your brush. So you have to do it kind of quick. It's kind of the hard part about pupils, but I think I did a good enough job here. I'm pretty happy with it. As you can see now, I'm shifting it blue, just like I said I would. This is the Drakenhof Nightshade. You know, they have silly names over there at Games Workshop, Citadel Land, but that's okay. It's a great blue wash that I really like. And again, it's going to mix with that black and further tint that white to give it kind of a blue look. Now, it's still going to look fairly blue here. Imagine how it would look without the Nuln oil. It'd be way too blue. I'm really glad I did the Nuln oil first. I am going to do quite a bit of highlighting. I'm going to do a base highlight pretty much everywhere to pop back out those ridges to actually be the correct color of that white gray. More or less, it's just one coat, so it's going to be, you know, it's a little bit opaque. And let some of that through because it's not, you know, it's not fully going to cover up the shade here. But then I'm going to do light reflection highlight. Again, something I've never done before, trying new things, really experimenting and kind of stretching my legs or my arms or whatever I'm stretching as a painter to try and do a bit better. I'm going to start with a dry brush. Very carefully. Obviously, I'm scared to death of using this thing and find out quickly I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm definitely going to have to get my brush out and actually highlight this all by hand. Yeah, it took a bit. We're going to go through it pretty quick because, again, I'm editing it for you guys, but as you can see, now I have it out and I'm just doing the side one. The ridges, again, it's all molded so fantastic. This is by far the best thing I've painted so far to date. Super impressed with this. And I can't wait to try more big miniatures like this. I'm gonna have to get a few more and keep doing this just to keep me motivated, keep me pumped up. Hopefully you guys appreciate something like that too. Maybe a bit more artistic, even if it's maybe slightly less useful for you because it's not like you're getting her or not. Speaking of which, you can buy her right now. She will work in the game. It's supposed to launch hopefully later this year, actually. So keep tuned to this channel for much more on that once we do get more information. But a link in the description below to the Celestial shop where you can buy her and many others in the Steam universe. Super unique. I also unboxed them. So I unboxed almost the whole range. I'm missing a few. I definitely want to get a few more, especially like Twilight looks really interesting. She's probably the other one that I think has the most character about her. She's like tied up, very interesting. Anyway, a link to the unboxing down below as well. I suppose if you've made it, you know, what is this, like almost 20 minutes into the video probably by the time I'm done here. If you made it this far and you're interested in trying your hand at Nüwa, maybe you have a better job at it than me, by all means, follow that link below to see about purchasing it. And if you do paint her, I would love to see it. So be sure to tag me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Tag me here in the comments. I don't care. I would love to see what you guys do with her. She's a fantastic sculpt. Really enjoyed it. As you can see, I'm still highlighting this. Even with the side of the brush highlight, it's taking quite a while. And I think I edited all of these out. But every so often, I do get a little bit on like the skin or something, then I have to touch it up. But it's not too bad. Here you can see I'm doing that kind of direct highlight where the light is actually first hitting the hair and reflecting off of it, where it's like curved up like that. I think it turned out really, really well. I'm gonna skip a little bit because I actually end up blending it. I end up putting 2 coats over the same area, and then I end up blending it. So, because again, white gray doesn't, you know, it takes a few coats. But in the end, I think it came out great. Additionally, I think towards the very end, off camera, when I finally had it on the base, I felt it was a little too drastic because the base isn't highlighted up that much. Granted, I want the base to seem almost nightmarish and dark and dreary, like it's some hellscape that she views it as, versus maybe how the magical force actually is. but it still was too much contrast for me. Again, I'm trying to do a fine balance between her fitting in the world and her feeling out of place. So I do blend it a bit more than what you see right now later on, but I don't really show that. This is natural steel. It's a fantastic base coat. It's my go-to base coat for silver. You can darken it, you can highlight it. It shows both great, which is exactly what I do. I want to slap some Nuln oil on it, then I'm going to highlight it back up. Works really, really well. Again, be careful. You're working around everything that... Actually, I haven't finished the orange part yet. That part took me a while to do. I'm not sure why. Sometimes I feel like perhaps I just paint whatever I want to paint next. I kind of do it ad hoc. I'm not sure there's a rhyme or reason to. Just whatever I'm compelled to paint next, I guess. Sometimes it's by convenience. Sometimes it's not. You know, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I guess before I finish, you know, the armor and stuff, I should probably have finished the hair first. Maybe I was thinking that. I wish it was something conscious, guys. I really do. Oh, well. I didn't mention this, but you saw it. Nuln oil on that. And then we're going to wait for that to dry a little bit. And we're going to get emerald out. Another fantastic color I don't use hardly enough. And this is for these kind of... I don't know if they're more gem glass-like. I'm considering them a little bit more like that. Maybe a glass versus a metal. What I like about it is it fits perfectly, this emerald, with that green and blue color scheme we're already doing. It pops out sufficiently well from the orange, but still looks like it works. Definitely nice little accents to the rest of the miniature. I think the metal and then these emerald pieces add a lot of visual complexity to it, which I really like. Again, being super careful here. Luckily, everything is pretty much perfectly molded, so it all goes on super nice, and no problems there at all. So you might have seen, by the way, on her face, there's a few, you know, I don't know what they are. On her temple, on the other side of her face right now, there's this stuff coming onto her, again, semi kind of, robotic or mechanical, so I'll begin to that later. Tanned flesh for her lips. I went back and forth on how dark to do her lips. In the end, I decided I wanted her makeup kind of stark, just because I wanted to bring that focus to the face. Like I said, I wanted you to kind of essentially go from the base, up the tail, up her torso, and then finally lock in on those eyes and that expression of hers. As kind of where your eye sticks, and then you're kind of stuck there staring at her, wondering exactly what she's feeling right now, and then you can soak in everything else. So again, on this, as I said, adding white to the highlight, I just went straight to the highlight. A lot of times, to get a really good blend, you're gonna put the base color down, and then do a highlight on top of the base color, covering about 80% of what you just colored the base color. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to do a little bit more drastic highlights. I think it might make it seem a bit shinier, and it might pop out a bit more from a distance. Ideally, it just makes her seem a bit more radiant, and it's something I've just been trying to do, as opposed to do a million kind of blends and keeping it kind of muddied and dark. I wanted her to really kind of stand out. Pretty much the opposite of how I normally paint. I don't know if that's coming across or not. I don't know if it was mission successful or failure, but I do what I can. Also added white to the emerald here, just to do a kind of a light entering point. I wasn't quite, because it's aimed right at where I thought the light source was, but I didn't want to do a dot in the middle, because I felt that would look kind of weird. So I'm just trying to kind of give it shape, and hopefully that'll work. Perhaps it's light bouncing off of something, put it back in. I don't know. I'm no expert at light. I don't apparently understand how light works when it comes to making up it in my head and then applying that here. But again, hopefully I did what I could with that. Alright, next up, Shining Silver. Again, you can darken it, you can highlight it up. The Natural Steel by Vallejo is a great base color, and the Shining Silver is a fantastic highlight, just because I think it shows up so good. I don't know if it's maybe a little bit more glittery or what, but you can see where I paint it. Like, it's a lot of times when you're painting this metallic stuff, because it's metallic, you know, it's kind of glittery, it's shining in your eyes that you're seeing anyway, so you're not even sure if you're like painting on a highlight or not, right? You're almost putting the paint where you see the natural highlight, and I think this one shows up pretty well, so that's good. I am slightly breaking my rule here. That is intentional. First of all, I think it matches the art that I get, and also because these are so small, but they're so interesting to have these wires kind of hooked up there that I want it, and they kind of frame her face. So if you think about it, you're looking at her face, you wanted that to be the kind of standard point there. Why not put these two black line wires on either side of her face? It kind of frames what I want you to focus on. So again, I don't know if this is just stuff I think in my head. Maybe I'm crazy, I don't know. But that was the idea anyway. Okay, so this was rough. I broke this twice. Hopefully you can't tell too much. I'm putting dark sea blue on it. Again, a great color. I bought it and used it once for a Rising Sun miniature, and now I finally get to use it again. I'm going to kind of speckle or spackle or whatever, just kind of very roughly paint this after I do a whole base coat here that's very thorough with other blues. Hopefully it makes it look like it's kind of that deconstruction thing that they have going on there. Gray blue, like I said, on this, heavily watered down, and I'm actually mixing that with that Elfic Flesh just to help it, I'm actually mixing it with that Elfic Flesh just to, again, help it blend, help it not be so drastic. It's supposed to just be kind of coming over her face. Okay, so the tail. This is really the other half of the miniature. Believe it or not, we've painted like half of it, but this goes way quicker because it's just scales. So I got the Goblin green out. I'm going to use two different greens. They're going to be fairly close, but then I'm going to use two different shades or washes, and that's going to be the driving force behind the difference. I'm also going to highlight them quite differently, and I think it sufficiently shows the difference between kind of the underside of her tail and those large kind of, you know, hard scales that she has too. Again, weird things I think about. I don't know, maybe this is, you know, weird, but she has such drastic scales in the front and then just the soft skin in the back. Again, it kind of seemed like she's on the defense there. In my mind, maybe I'm thinking about it too much for my own good here, but that's kind of how I looked at it. Like, she has this tough armor, but underneath that is just this kind of soft flesh that could break at any moment. So, okay, now we have the green skin out. This is a slightly darker green. It's going to be even darker, but I think it's a little bit more vibrant. This is going to be for kind of the cracked blend here that we have, and then also the skin. Okay, so now we've done all the skin. As you can see, a little bit darker here, and or not skin. I don't know what the underside of a scaled tail is, but you know, it's whatever. Anyway, and so this is just going to look fairly close, and I do put another coat on it. It's Army Painter, so the coverage is not good. If there's any review I can do of Army Painter, I can say cheap, good selection of colors, bad coverage. Alright, this is orange, brown, and what looks like a kind of a rattlesnake kind of tail here. What I liked about this is it gives the illusion that she's not quite as defenseless as she might appear. And I really dig that. It's actually one of my favorite, I know it's probably silly, it's one of my favorite parts of this miniature. Her face and the overall sculpt and pose is by far my favorite. But just the fact that they added that little bit of kind of threat to her, I really like here. This is the Green Wash by Citadel Athonian Camo Shade. This is on all of the big scales here. And again, this is going to darken it up, but it's still green. I'm going to do another shade on the kind of other side, which should really start to differentiate the two greens that are otherwise fairly close together. Nuln oil is my darkening of choice here because otherwise I'd do a brown. I don't want to make it look dirty. I wanted her, again, to be kind of pristine and clean, almost like I don't want to say an angel, but, you know, like just something majestic. Or she seems to almost have a radiance to her. I even thought about putting some OSL effect around her, like she was almost glowing. That was too much, and again, I wasn't sure if I could pull it off with the shape that she is. Getting the different strengths of OSL would have been very difficult for me. And now I've added white to that original green. Like I said, really trying to pop out the highlight here. Here more than ever. By the way, look at my brush there. That is a Winsor & Newton, and it is split. I have had terrible luck. The best brushes I have ever bought, link below, because you know I'm tired of, you know, not commenting them The Most Wanted Lit by Army Painter. Their brushes, they're synthetic, and they're fantastic. They keep a point well beyond the fact that they should. Every Winsor Newton I've had has split. My Raphael that I just got, that I've tried to paint a lot with, that split too. I've just not had any luck. Perhaps I'm too rough with my brushes, but either way, the Natural Saber Fur apparently cannot withstand how rough I am with them. And look at that. I spent way too much money on those brushes for it to do that. So do yourself a favor and get some synthetic brushes you can be a little rough with. Either way, as I was saying, sorry about that. I'm doing a heavy highlight here because I want it to seem reflective. I do not want to put gloss on this. I don't want it to actually reflect the light. With the gloss, you can't really control what's being reflected, right? Because as you turn it, it'll change, and I wanted it to be kind of static light source here. Again, just trying my hand at that. And again, it should pop it out a lot. I didn't like it at first. I hated it and wanted to stop after the first scale. That one scale highlighted looked terrible. Work with Reikland Fleshshade on that. Again, orange, red wash, or red-brown wash works great. But I think altogether, as you can see, I think it highlighted pretty well. It's one of those things, it's taught me a little bit of perseverance, I guess. If at first I don't like it, but I believe I'm doing the right thing, go with it, and once it's completed, see how it looks. And I think it looks a lot better here. Here's an example of something that was a happy accident. I wanted the underside to seem, slimy isn't the word for it, kind of like more snake-like, right? Where it's very, very shiny and smooth, more or less. So I added a little bit more white than I normally would to try and give it a drastic highlight, but it's also fairly watered down, and it ended up looking kind of more muddy to me. It was just a little bit too much. But again, I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm going to finish it, see if I like it. I end up not liking it. And so I'm going to fix it here in a little bit. And I think it ended up being perfect, exactly how I wanted it. So here it is. I just put another coat of Nuln oil on top of that to tone it down a little bit, blend it in a little bit. And that wash being the last step, the wash is a little bit kind of shiny. I don't know if you've ever like done the dip thing where you just like dip a whole miniature in like some quick shade from Army Paint or whatever, but it's almost like a varnish on its own. It's just a little bit, it doesn't dry as matte as a lot of these acrylic paints do, which you want your acrylic paints to dry as matte as possible. I heard Scale 75 is great for that. Whereas Army Painter is a little bit more, it gets that painty kind of look to it. This kind of, again, it helps drive that in. So happy accident, works out well. Again, with the drastic highlights. Now, I will say when they're wet and you're first putting them on, they look a little bit more drastic than normal because they are wet, so they're reflecting light. As they dry, it won't be quite as drastic, but again, just quick highlight on that, and then I'm good and done with that. And we are almost ready to start on the base, so that's exciting. I got that Elfic Flesh out again. Man, I used a lot of it on this miniature. From the wash and just painting it, as you can see, it's a little rough there. And I want that blend to be good. You can see on the art that blend from flesh to skin is actually pretty smooth. So I'm going to spend some time here. I'm not going to show it all on camera, but definitely kind of working on that. Now, last piece here of the puzzle is that DNA strand. I got the emerald out again. As you can see, I'm not covering it 100%. I'm just haphazardly putting it there. The concept art makes her look like she's constructing the DNA herself, which very much is part of the story. I'm not going to get a whole into that. Maybe at some point we can have Byron sit down in a lazy boy and just tell us the whole thing. But until that happens, this seems to work with her story and what she's doing here and her followers and whatnot. Anyway, this is kind of my attempt at doing that, and I think it works really well. I'm going to keep covering it to where I think eventually, by the time I'm done with the different colors, a lot of that dark original color isn't showing up anymore. But here's just over my napkin I was using with some Viking blue, just so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. I know that's a dark background. But again, just kind of haphazardly, not trying to cover all the emerald, not trying to cover all the dark sea blue or green or whatever that first color was that I can't remember the name of right now. Just going about it, and you're gonna have to twist it. It is pretty rough. And as you can see, you gotta be a little careful. Even putting my brush on there, it starts to bend it a little bit. Really thin resin is really rough. This is definitely a delicate process here, but it is doable. If I can do it, you can. Adding a little bit of OSL onto your hands. This is just that Viking blue, super watered down, and putting it there. I don't want to do anything too drastic here. I just wanted a hint of it. And again, be careful, you don't want to flick it or splash it anywhere. But this is just to give it a sense that it is actually coming out of her hands, and it's actually kind of bright and lit up. Lothern Blue by Citadel. I love this blue, it's super bright. It's great for stuff like electricity or maybe something like this. And again, just covering bits and pieces of it, making it splotchy on purpose. Whew, I don't know about you guys, but I am almost out of breath. Alright, but look at that, we're on the base. Like I said, I'm going to be changing the base a little bit. A lot of it is from your feedback. I actually did go back and read your guys' comments. Thanks so much for those comments, by the way. I appreciate the constructive and friendly criticism you guys had. I'm very new to this, so I think I did a pretty good job for our first attempt, but we're going to touch it up just a little bit here, and hopefully you appreciate the changes. This is a Nuln oil, just to darken that mud even more. Additionally, if you recall, I'm using 2 different Vallejo textures, some with grass and some with not. A European mud and a grass and mud texture. They are slightly different colors. Even with mixing them, you can tell in the end they're 2 different colors. Adding this Nuln oil wash, I think, really helps solidify a kind of samey blending into it, so it doesn't look like I'm necessarily using 2 different kinds, and that some just has grass and some doesn't. Alright, now I'm actually taking a little bit of a Gryllian Earth Shade, or Athonian Camo Shade, that green wash. And I'm actually putting it kind of towards the bottom a little bit, in some of the heavier recesses, and just kind of making splotches of it. I'm going to be putting moss on it. Now, I didn't film it. Well, I tried to, but my hand was in the way. It just wasn't going to work with how I needed to put it in there, because I actually bought some of that from like the supermarket store or the grocery store. I actually went to like the flower portion, and they have that kind of moss that you can put in flower beds, that like fake moss. I think it's real moss. Either way, super dried out moss, but they're really too big. I've actually used them as like little shrubs for my hate miniatures, and they look great there. For this, I crushed it up, so I just got little pieces on it after I put some glue on there. You can see it there on the cliff now, and then got some Woodland Scenics burnt grass and filled in the rest, and just gives that kind of mossy texture to it. Now here I have buff out, and this is for the inside rings of the trees. I think it was Paul Gima, I think you were the one that mentioned this. If not, I apologize if you were. Hey, look, I remembered. Anyway, the rings inside of the tree should be a little bit lighter. I didn't want them to look super dead, because these are actually, in my opinion, alive. The cliff would technically go up more too, but I want to make sure you can see the miniature. So I didn't want to cover it up with bushy trees and a tall cliff. And so they're not like gray and dead or anything. And so this is kind of just showing that even if they are technically chopped down, they're freshly chopped down here. Drastic change here, so I'm going to put a wash on it, but which, here we go. Agrax Earthshade, put it in there. Now, when doing this, again, I'm being fairly careful. I don't want to change the parts that I'm happy with. I just want to kind of update it a little bit, but they have some deep ridges, and I really want them to pop out, so I'm going to pull in there. Additionally, I'm taking this Agrax Earthshade and just kind of putting it throughout the cliff. Again, just adding a little bit of color to it. A lot of you guys, as rightfully so, commented that this was perhaps a bit too gray and plain and detached from the rest of the base here. I did want it to seem like it's rock and not necessarily earth, but it can definitely be a little dirty. In fact, I try to point these like stripes down. Obviously when they dry they're much fainter, but it's the sense that it's been falling down the cliff of some kind, so hopefully that works out well. And then again, I put some kind of up on top as well, just to, again, add a little bit of variance and hopefully make it seem a little bit more organic. The more colors you throw on something, typically the more organic it is. Alright, now I got some PVA glue out, just some white Elmer's glue, really dabbing it on there. I don't even bother watering it down. But I'm not globbing it on either, because I want it to be a little bit patchy. But I'm going to end up putting some grass here. I thought about this, whether I wanted to put mud on her or kind of more grass around her. Both can make her seem like she fits in it. If there's grass, it kind of hides the bottom of her just a little bit, makes it seem like she's in the thick of it. Whereas if it's mud, I actually need to put the mud on her. With how her tail is curled, I wasn't confident that I would properly put mud where it should be, as if she had slithered in. Additionally, and I thought about this later, I didn't put a path for her to get there. So if she slid through the mud like that, and it was just nothing but mud, there should be like a snake trail, right? She kind of slithered in there, and I certainly wasn't about to redo this base, and so I went with the grass instead, and this is some really good grass. I really like this. Link in the description below. It's kind of like this brown, kind of dead. It works well here. I actually bought it for hate. But it works, I think, quite well here. So now she's glued on here, and I just need to touch up that rim. So this is, again, pure black. One of the few times I think putting black on the rim of a base is okay. Typically, I don't want to do that because it pops it out so much, but I definitely want it to be separate from the rest of the plinth here. I want it to just be that top portion as if it's a cut out of the whole scene with the miniature on top. So hopefully this black actually almost assists with that and helps us versus hinders us with that. Alright guys, I'm so excited. We are almost done here. I've now matte varnished it with some Tesser's Dull Coat. And now I actually have the Tesser's Gloss Coat brush on varnish, which I'm putting just on those emerald pieces and then on the gems. And that's it. Nothing else. I'm not putting it on her armor or anything like that because I don't want it to seem kind of that shiny, if that makes sense. Additionally, having on just portions of it make those portions seem even more shiny. So if that's glass, if that's glow-in-the-dark shiny crystal, it should be a little glossy, I would think. And this is it, the finished miniature. Guys, I hope you really did enjoy this. I loved every moment of this. I really enjoyed spending the time on a miniature like this to really kind of paint the best of my abilities. Now, granted, my abilities aren't the best. My name is the King of Average, after all. I don't pretend to be a professional here. But I was able to accomplish this, which means any of you guys watching could at least paint this good, if not better. I think a lot of it isn't necessarily even skill. It's mostly just time investment. Obviously, I spent way longer on this than I have on any, just board game piece that I normally paint. But boy, between the crafting side of it with the cork board and the texture bases and the gems and the glowing and the resin stumps and all that and just designing it all, it's just so fun to paint, and she's such a fantastic model that I really hope I did my justice to her. So again, link to her and many of the other things that I use in the description below. If you liked the video, if you watched it for all these 40 minutes plus, at least give it a like. That super helps. I really do appreciate it. As always, I have a Patreon, and I want to super provide a big shout out to all of my patrons. You guys are awesome and rock and encourage me along the way, and I love showing you little teasers of her and, doing the early access stuff and sending you guys miniatures. I just did that to a couple of you guys, and you guys are just awesome, and I love having you with me on this journey, and thanks so much for the support. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more paintings and art things, with miniatures or Kickstarters or unboxings and reviews of board games, subscribe. If not, I appreciate you being here. Either way, say hi in the comments below. I'd love to say hi back. And just thank you for being here. All right, guys, thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.